Hi, everybody. What's going on? I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching The Sit Down. Bring Your Own Brigade. It's a brand new CBSN documentary. Lucy Walker is the director. Lucy, it's really nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm happy to be here talking to you. Thank you.
So you have this film coming out in theaters. It's going to be on Paramount Plus later in August. And people are going to learn about the wildfires in California. And folks may know some stuff, but we learn a ton in here. What was it like for you to be on the ground, talking to all these individuals and immersing yourself in this whole world here?
Oh, it was an incredible journey making this film. I've made a lot of documentaries, but this one was about where I moved to. I moved to California and the hillsides were on fire. And I thought, my goodness, I'm from the UK, I'm from London. And I thought the last big fire we had there was in 1666, the Great Fire of London. I thought we solved fire, and I lived in New York City, went to film school and spent my 20s in New York City and thought, well, we've solved fires. And I get to California and I think, why is the hillside on fire? What are we doing wrong? And to go on that journey of understanding, well, why is California burning? Why do these places burn? Why are we having this global fire crisis? But to tell that story and to come to this understanding through following individual firefighters and residents through these deadly incidents, it was really quite a journey, and at points terrifying, at points incredibly moving, at points incredibly awe-inspiring, and just like really revelatory. Actually, the movie has quite a lot of different sort of chapters, all of which really take you around a corner that I hadn't anticipated, and really kind of turned the whole story on its head for me, which was made for a very interesting time making the film, actually. And the characters in the film are just incredibly stunning. So it was really a privilege to meet them and follow them.
There's so many different layers to this story, and I want to talk first about the individuals, because we see the images of the fires in the hillside, but it's another thing to understand the devastation that people had individually in their own lives. So what was it like going to these people's places where their homes were, where they have no more materials, where everything they owned is gone? What was it like telling that part of the story?
Oh my goodness. I mean, on a personal level, it's traumatic, and it's also sort of obviously uncomfortable, because it's not like, we had a coffee shop, you're in a disaster area. And it's also very strange and uncanny because the disaster area is within driving distance of your home. In the case of Malibu, it's less than an hour away from where I live, and yet everything had burned, and the whole thing is cordoned off behind disaster lines, and people's homes and lives are ruined, and people have lost lives. And some of the people caught up, both firefighters and residents, were friends of mine, and to really understand the impact of what it is to lose your home. And also the decision, I couldn't believe that people stay and defend their own homes. I am a chicken. When a fire comes along, you can actually hear me having a panic attack in the film, which I thought was honest to share. But I am not somebody who naturally, isn't afraid of these fires. I was terrified even when the fire was reasonably far away. And so I was really in awe of the firefighters and the responders and the residents who chose to stay and fight. But that was also really perplexing to me. I mean, who would stay and fight these absolutely terrifying fires? And for me to even just go on that journey alone of understanding like what would possess people to stay, and to ask people that was extraordinary as well. So I feel like I had a lot to learn about this area that I'd moved to, and a lot that really revealed to me how kind of naive and ignorant I'd been as a European immigrating to California. And it was just a fascinating journey.
The other really interesting thing too is that we see these fires and people just automatically associate it with climate change, right? That's just a really simple thing to do. But
me included, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's a lot more to this story, and you go into the impact of timber and even just the infrastructure around forests. So what was it like learning that part of it, and how important was it to give more context to the story of wildfires?
Well, that's right. I started out thinking, well, we've had these world's hottest summers and these world's biggest, worst fires, and they've all been happening in recent years. And so it really seemed to kind of correlate. And I made that mistake of thinking that that was the cause, and that climate change was the only factor driving these fires. And it's kind of actually really good news that it's not just climate change that's driving the fires, because there are these other factors that we can control. But it was a real surprise to me to learn that. And it was, we really did a lot of work and really followed the story and didn't just sort of go home with the first story we found. We really, I really wanted to get the story right. You know, there's a lot of life being lost. There's a lot of lives being really devastated by these fires. And I really wanted to sort of do justice to the overwhelming, you know, problem that we find ourselves in with these, and globally, look at Australia, or even in the UK, where I'm originally from, they're having a wildfire problem, even in Northern Europe or Siberia. I mean, what's going on? And so I really wanted to get to the bottom of what the whole issue was. And it turned out there's a few different factors, I mean, very shocking, and that we've kind of completely got it backwards in some cases. And through following the individuals that we get to know in the fires and kind of keeping going with the story, I was able to uncover a lot more that was a real shock to me, but I think is really ultimately good news, because there are things that we can do. And that's what we need, because I mean, even right now, we've got the Dixie fire burning, which started right where the campfire that burned Paradise burned, and is still burning uncontained. And we're unfortunately going to get more and more and more of these. But there are things that we can do, both that when fire comes through, communities and homes and people are still safe. And also the fires will be less severe. You know, I learned about how Native American people have been working with fire, not just as an enemy, but actually as an ally, as a tool, and using prescribed burns, cultural burns, to actually control how much fuel is on the landscape, and how we can manage the severity of the burns. So not treating fires. We have a culture of fire actually born of, like me, Europeans that came to California and thought that fire was something that we should be able to put out, that want to put out every single little fire. But actually, when we put out every single little fire, we're just stacking up all this fuel, so that when fire inevitably does come along, it's enormous. We also have extraordinary revelation in the fire about logging, which was something that was proposed as a solution to these fires. But when you really understand that fire that happened in Paradise, and you look at the logged areas, you've realized that actually it was the logged areas that the fire was racing through. And I started to understand that landscape so much better, and understand that actually logging was a hugely exacerbating factor and not a solution after all. But yeah, we follow these really salty and fantastic characters through these journeys of revelation. So it was really, hopefully for people to watch as well, that it's a really, you know, entertaining movie, and not just a kind of, it's not a lecture textbook kind of a documentary, I hope.
No, you stay hooked throughout the entire thing. There's no question about that. You've been making films for a really long time. You've been nominated for multiple Academy Awards. What was the biggest challenge of making this film here?
The challenge of making this film, I think it was the ambition of this film. I really wanted to actually understand the fire problem, and through the individual story, so that it feels really absorbing and moving and like a movie, and not like a dry, boring, you know, kind of textbook thing. I wanted to make a really like spectacular film that you feel like you had a, you know, proper, you know, wonderful documentary, well-made experience. But I really didn't want to shortchange understanding the truth of what was going on, and to tell a big picture story using individual stories, and to understand a big subject by following individuals, and to put together all this material. You know, we actually gathered material, not just that we shot because we were embedded with the fire fighters, but we also gathered material that people had been filming on their own phones and cameras through the incident that was incredibly intense. We also filed freedom of information requests to get the 911 call, so you could hear people in the fire talking on 911 calls, and you could also hear the radio traffic between the first responders. So you really get this 360 envelopment in the incident. And for me, that wasn't, I didn't just want to give people a horror movie experience, because it is worse than any horror movie. It's just the most horrific thing to be inside these absolutely hellish incidents. But for me, it was important because I wanted people to understand exactly what was going on in these incidents, because for me, the clues are in there. The audience could actually put together what's important and what's true and what's really happening, because I think that we can and will do better in future about how we live with the reality of fire in our landscape. And I think that the clues are all there when you put it all together. So the challenge was actually taking all that material and making it into a cohesive and coherent, real journey that the audience could take and be able to put together for themselves. I think to understand for themselves what was going on, what is going on.
Yeah, listen, I think a lot of people will have a greater understanding of what's going on here, and you deserve a ton of credit for that. So Lucy, it's a pleasure to meet you. Congrats on the film. Folks can watch it in theaters. They can watch it on Paramount Plus. Looking forward to everybody checking it out. Thank you.
Thank you.